Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time once again for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. TRINH. The one show, the only show that shows you the path to a healthier life, one conversation at a time. And today, well, we've got the conversation I've been waiting for a long time. Dr. TRINH, fill us in. Who'd you bring in today here?
All right, everyone. Welcome and good morning. My good friend Jordan. We go back probably about 10 years when we were in Vietnam together, I believe.
Good morning, brother.
Yes. We were kind of like missionaries in Vietnam together, doing some work, and it's been 10 years, hasn't it, Jordan?
Yeah, it's been amazing. Yeah, it's been amazing. Been great to get to know you and work together.
I'm old enough to remember when, Dr. TRINH, when you said that phrase, we were in Vietnam together, that had a whole different meaning. That meant for my generation, we were serving in what they call the Great American War over there, what we call the Vietnam War over here. It was a different time and place in Vietnam here. Vietnam, that phrase had a completely different meaning from a peace-loving, helpful, let's help the world phrase to a violent time against a communist erection. It was a whole different thing here. And you really are the perfect person to kind of talk about that segue a little bit, because you were one of the people flying out in the helicopters, fleeing the country at that moment. That vivid image that I have as a kid of the last helicopter leaving Saigon, since renamed something else or whatever here. Talk about that a little bit. Is any of that resonate, or is that just old guys like me here? The fact that you guys were back in Vietnam for peaceful healing purposes here. Is that?
Yes, very interesting that we use the same terminology. I guess the Vietnam veterans were together for a different reason, and Jordan and I came back for an absolutely different reason 10 years ago. So very, very interesting to point that out.
And what brought Jordan back to Vietnam? Jordan can go anywhere to help people. Why are you in Vietnam helping people?
Yeah. So I've been on a decades-long mission to try to figure out what's going on in the world and learn.
You and everybody else.
What the hell is going on around here?
Yeah.
And so
who do I see about this? Who's responsible for all this? How do we change
who's
this?
Who's in charge around here? Those are exactly the questions. So that journey's led me through, dozens of different countries, and one of the places I was attempting to explore a little bit was over there. And so, it was amazing. So ended up on a plane flight with Dr. TRINH and some other amazing folks for a couple of weeks over there. And, it was really amazing. You brought up the war, but it was incredible as we went through, some of the very rural areas of Vietnam to watch the ongoing destruction, let's say, of people's health and lives from all those chemicals and everything, decades ago.
Agent Orange, we couldn't find the enemy in the jungle, so let's just drop a chemical and eliminate the jungle, not wondering what will happen to all the people left or all the people below when we drop those chemicals. Yeah,
exactly. So now, 50 years later, we're still, you still walk through, and we were fortunate enough to, walk down the street and just be invited into people's little huts and homes, and kids and elderly people with deformities and all sorts of issues flowing from that. And it's an interesting segue to another conversation I had this week too. Speaking of dumping chemicals on our land, I had talks with Dr. TRINH last week, and then another food systems expert, where we were discussing that we're really doing that to our own soil here in America and around the world, dumping these toxic life-inhibiting chemicals that could have generational impacts.
Yeah. So, all right, walk us back. Jordan, tell us how this journey began. Tell us who you are and how are you trying to figure out the world?
Yeah. So I'm maybe odd, but from the time I was,
I'll accept that definition right up front. We'll run with that. He's odd. All right, but let's explore that a little further here. Right?
from the time I was 10 or 12, I'm a fairly spiritual person, and I had a visceral understanding that during my lifetime, the world was going to shake in profound ways, and there was going to need to be action on behalf of the people of goodwill.
All right, so
And
stop right there.
Yeah,
you just said something. 15 years I've been doing this, several years with Dr. TRINH. Nobody has casually said, when I was a kid, I just really could feel in my body in a very tangible way that this world was going to go through some earth-shaking experiences. What are you, a prophet? I mean, are you getting messages from God here? Are the heavens opening for you and you're seeing stuff we can't see?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, but I will say that the way that I experience my life is through a spiritual lens. And so the way that I perceive those things is they feel like they burst in on my consciousness. And so you can call that a dialogue with God. But yeah, I've been trying to live in, dialogical relationship with God from that time. And then, then God and the universe are kind enough to bring external events and other people who can perceive things around and speak. And so it's like, I've been trying for now, I'm 38 years old, right? So I've been trying now for the last 25 plus years to triangulate and figure out what that means to carry that, And so how I responded to that was to basically say, okay, this is a very strong impression. It's being spoken into my life in strange ways by other people that shouldn't know those things are being impressed upon me. So what is a young man to do? So basically when I was,
go get a job and forget about it.
Go get a job. That's kind of what I ended up doing. So when I was around that age, I was grabbed by the words of Solomon from thousands of years ago in the book of Proverbs, and in the opening couple of chapters, he lays out this search for wisdom, and he describes the search for wisdom as the most valuable thing in the world, more valuable than gold or silver or money. Nothing you can compare, nothing you could desire could compare. And so he talks about seeking it out like you're searching for hidden treasure. And so from that age,
I'll just point out that
that was kind of the beginning.
I'll just point out that we are streaming this live from the University of California, Irvine, that would completely agree with that philosophy, the search for wisdom. But they charge for that search. And it is a gold-colored logo. I'll point that out here. So maybe there is some gold in the wisdom that they're offering here. But wisdom is not something you just wander around and find. You have to, in today's world, go someplace and study at the feet of a master. You have to immerse yourself in technology. You have to become, there's so much to consume that you have to find some structured way to do it. You don't just wander around and see what's over here and bump into some people. That's like what they did in the Bible. Nobody does that anymore here.
Yeah, I had a very simple mechanism that I followed that worked for me, and it might work for other young men out there or women. But it was basically to take on as much responsibility as anyone would entrust me with, and try not to do things that would eventually disqualify me from whatever was asked in the future. So it was like, okay, if I'm preparing for an unknown future event, I need to become as competent as I possibly can, given my inadequacies and limitations, and try to not do stupid things that would disqualify me, 20, 30 years down the road, right? So that was kind of my heuristic.
Give me an example. I hear what you're saying, but I don't understand it. Give me an example.
Yeah, so examples are, so I started working very, very early, doing side stuff before you're legally allowed to work. And then as soon as, the day I was able to get a work permit, I was in the courthouse doing that. I figured out that at 15 and a half in California, you can get your motorcycle permit, whereas you can't drive till you're 16. And since it's a little old 1974 125cc Honda, your parents can't drive with you. So you're allowed to be alone out on the road. You just can't go at night or on the highways, so the day that I can, I'm getting motorcycle permits and work permits and going to work at bagel stores in the morning, after ice cream stores in the afternoon, and, just doing the little thing. Right. And pretty soon you're a shift leader, and then a manager, and then you get some more opportunities. And then I discovered that, I was reasonably competent in academics. So I discovered that instead of making $5 an hour at the ice cream store. Parents would pay me $40 an hour to teach their kids music and math and, those kinds of things. So then you get back into the entrepreneurial flow. And then my grandfather had started one of the large earth moving businesses on the West Coast. And so probably when I was, I don't know, 17, 18, he came to me and said, okay, this is great. You're doing well. But if you want something real on your resume, I'll call the guys at the company I started that I'm no longer involved with, but maybe they'll give you a minimum wage job again. So then stepping back to take on some responsibility in a heavy civil engineering company that's moving earth and building roadways and dams. And that just led to larger and larger projects, portfolios of projects, eventually, joint ventures, starting companies, an amazing journey out into nonprofit stuff. So that was kind of the quest.
So it sounds like somewhere you're glossing over the end of it here, because that's the part that stumbles most of us. I want to do good. I want to go wander the world. I want to in search of knowledge, but I got to pay the bills. I got to make a living. I got a family to feed. I got a mortgage to pay. And that usually derails most young people away from all these great ambitions. When I sit in college, what about you, doctors? When we'd sit in college, we'd talk for hours into the night about the world and great things and thoughts. And somewhere along the way, when we left school, I got debt to pay. I got a family to feed. I got something to do here. And that becomes the all-consuming passion. There isn't much time left for doing good and for wandering the world anymore. Talk about that, Dr. TRINH, or both of you. How do you avoid that problem? I won't call it a trap.
Absolutely. It's it's called living life and paying the bills and the mortgage and all that. And the question is, how do you direct or repurpose a lot of what you already do? What are your talents? What are your skill sets? And while you're using those talents and skill set to pay the bills and work, how can that also be repurposed to address the needs of your neighbor? And whether it's local or international.
Because we tend to think of philanthropy as somebody only for those who have made enough that they can step back from those daily responsibilities. It's a bonus. If I get enough, then I can give back. But for the majority of us, we can't give much back. One, because we don't have a lot of left over, and two, because it takes so much time and energy just to get through the day and to survive life and to maybe grow a little bit and get a few perks. I want to take a trip. I want to get a bigger house. A few things I like or desire. You don't have to be greedy about it, but just things that you want or your family wants or your kid wants. They need new braces. They got to go to college, other sorts of things. That can become, that I find in my own life and many people, that can push all those other things away to some other point. When I'm retired, when I have the time, when I have the resources, if I ever have the resources. And Bill Gates is a perfect example. I don't know Bill Gates from a hole in the wall, but just what little I've read about him, one of the things that he was criticized for much of his life, he was a workaholic, clearly, like many of these people. He worked round the clock daily and never gave to charity much, never got involved in donations, very wealthy man, but he was so focused on building this legendary company. And it was only when he stepped back and said, I give up that burden. I finally hand it off to somebody else, which very few entrepreneurs ever do. Hard to let go of your baby. But when he finally did that, suddenly he's flipped and become one of the greatest philanthropists of all time, donating, reportedly, he and others, this pledge he's going to give away almost all of his money during his lifetime here. I mean, from one extreme to the other, from don't talk to me, I don't have time, to I only have time to do this. Isn't there a middle ground? How have you worked that needle, Jordan? Have you made so much? Have you done well enough financially that you don't have to worry about the questions the rest of us do, or is there some wisdom you can give us how to do both?
Yeah, man. So I've walked the full gamut, and we can get into.
He's
some
so
of those
careful,
stories
Dr. TRINH, about how every word he chooses. I am so careful about saying all this.
Part of the reason I'm working doing side jobs and things is because when my father decided to give up his lucrative building business, so my father was building homes for people. And as he was building people's dream homes, he was watching, the addiction and the marriages falling apart and families struggling. And so he went, man, I'm building these beautiful homes for these people. And inside of those homes, the families are falling apart. Right. And so he ended up feeling deeply impelled to start a little non-denominational church down in San Clemente. And so that shattered our financial existence very early, so I was blessed with the opportunity, when I wanted to go to the movies with my friends at 11 years old or whatever, or when I wanted a pair of shoes that was different than the ones that were on sale, I got to pay for those if I wanted it, to do that. So that drove some of that early entrepreneurial activity. But there was another part of my life that at the same time, there was some sacrifice there to serve for our family. As a grandson of a successful businessman, I was really blessed. He would come along and say, hey, okay, you want your first guitar? I'll tell you what, I see you working hard. Whatever you raise for your guitar the next 3 months by working hard, I'll match it. So I'd go out and grind and, work for $5 an hour and get tips. And I'd come to him and I'd be like, all right, Grandpa, for the last 3 months, I saved $500. And he'd be like, okay, good job. Here's your other 500. And then I could go get a little nicer guitar than I could have. Right. So my grandfather gave me some amazing opportunities and steps up along the way, from that $500 to matching the $1,100 I put together to get a motorcycle so I could get a $2,200 motorcycle instead. Right. There's a lot of difference between a $1,000 and $2,000 motorcycle, right? Yeah. And so you're climbing
one runs, one doesn't. Yeah. One goes fast, one goes slow.
One goes slow and one goes a little faster. So, but you said something really important that I think is essentially the crux of the whole thing, which is there will never be enough left over.
Yeah.
So if you start with that premise, I think you fail immediately when the thought's conceived, because there will never be anything left over. That's like the law of life and nature, is that your expenses will expand to fill what you have. The task time allotted a task will expand to fill the time you allot to it. Right. And so things just kind of gradually expand. So that's where this, timeless wisdom from thousands of years comes back and is maybe helpful, which is that you always have enough if you give out of the first fruits before anything else, right? So what I'm, encouraging myself to do and others, right? It's like we would like to be committed to this 100% of the time, but we can always take 1/10 of our time, let's say an hour a day nominally, right? And you can find an hour a day if you think you don't have it. There's been many times in my life where it's like, shoot, I remember one time in my life where I was a little lost on this journey and needed to get back in touch with the spirit within and figure out, directionality. And I had, wandered in the desert for a few years. And so it's like, all right, God, I'll make a deal, because I remember that somewhere
I love making deals with God. Throughout the whole Bible and throughout my whole life, haven't we all tried to make a deal with God?
Make a deal.
Give me this. Here's the deal, God. You do this, I'll do this. How about it?
So I did it differently than that, though. I remembered a verse that said, you'll seek me and find me if you search for me with all your heart, right? And I was this was maybe in my mid-20s during adjustment phase. So I said, all right, I'm going to get up earlier. I'm going to get up between 4 and 4:30 every day, and I'm going to show up. And I'm going to show up for an hour and see what happens. And so I showed up. And I started praying, and I started writing, and I started redeveloping vision, getting back in touch with those callings from youth. So that was how I approached that, basically, because at the time I'm working, way more hours than most people know. I ended up another shortcut I took was involved sacrifice too. So that's a sacrifice to get up earlier and work harder.
Right.
Another place that one of those decision points came, you mentioned sitting in college and thinking about when you're gonna engage life. So I was lucky enough to go to Pepperdine my freshman year in Malibu. And then I was lucky enough to get to spend my second year of school in Heidelberg, Germany, with an unlimited rail pass, school 4 days a week and an unlimited rail pass.
What?
And
wow.
So I came back from that and was interning. I try, every time I had a week off school or a summer or anything, Easter break, Christmas break, I'd go back in and intern and work at that civil construction company.
Right.
And so I was about 3 weeks before going back to my junior year of college, getting ready to surf and play in Malibu. And the economy was busy, and we won an incredible job, about a $45 million job, really complicated right on the beach. Was going to be, it was a marquee job. And they were looking for a project engineer with a college degree and 5 to 7 years of experience. And so as we ticked closer and closer to me getting ready to go back to school, the guys that we're working with were going through, dozens of interviews. And the guy who was going to be the project manager kept going to the CEO saying, man, we're interviewing all these people with college degrees and 5 to 7 years of experience. I'd really, really like to bet on Jordan. If I'm responsible for this thing, I think we could succeed with him. And so the CEO kept saying, no, we need someone more experienced. Finally, 3 weeks before I was go back and start school, the CEO said, okay, you're in charge. So whatever you think you need to succeed. So I ended up making the decision, instead of going back and playing on the beach for another 2 years, to go, okay, if this requires a college degree in 5 to 7 years, and I can take this opportunity now, back to the ethos of taking on as much responsibility as anyone entrusts me with, this potentially cuts 7 to 9 years off my path.
Yeah.
So I ended up starting working, 60 hours a week, and then finishing my degree at night and on the weekends. And, then that made me financially self-sufficient at, by 21. That let me get married to the woman I fell in love with when she was 13 and I was 14. So by the time I was 21, I'm married, I'm working, on some complicated projects, going to school at nights and weekends, and kind of ended up following that ethos through. So to summarize that, I think the critical concept is you always have enough to give a 10th of your time and resources up front to the highest overarching and uniting principle in your life. And then that can expand over time as you're faithful in that.
That's the principle of tithing. I'm a Catholic. We don't ever grow up with that tradition, but in so many Protestant traditions or evangelical traditions, that's just a fundamental start from where you go. You give a 10th to, and the initial 10th, not the leftover 10th.
Exactly. Because there'll never be a 10th that's left over.
Yeah. When I got extra, you can have it, but first I got to pay the bills. And that's a hard thing to do. That really, I've never done that. That really struggles with that concept of, boy, I barely got enough to get by this month, and you want a 10th of it? I'm just going to take a 10th of it? I could use that really bad over here of my credit card, or to fix my car, or to do something else here. There's a lot of other good things. What do you think about that? Do you tithe, Dr. Trent? Are you a tither?
I tithe when somebody reminds me.
Yeah. I'm not trying to call you out and feel I don't tithe. I've never tithed in my life, but I hear people say, no, that's just an important part. I start with that. And tithing's easy if you got lots of money. Tithing's hard if you're getting by. If you just get by.
Exactly. Yeah, there's an amazing story that illuminates that too. That's that famous story of the widow's mite. 2,000 years ago, as Jesus is showing up and basically calling out, all the corrupt religious and political people of the time, just like we are now.
Right.
He makes this observation that the religious elite are going around, and even when they're picking herbs from their garden, for their dinner, they're taking like one sprig, a 10th, and bringing it to the temple, right? And so then it's time to go give, and all the people come in parading and music and loudly giving their lots of money,
right?
And this little old lady shows up and puts in a couple pence, and so Jesus is watching this and goes, she gave more than any of them, because they gave a little out of the abundance they had, and she gave everything out of what she didn't have. Right. So it's so deeply an issue of spirit and heart,
and trust and belief.
Trust,
I'm going to do this, even if it doesn't feel good. I'm not sure I can do this, but I'm going to take a leap of faith and try something. All right. So you go from that kind of mentality. So that's what I was trying to get. So you found a way to make a living and to do the normal things, and you're married. Do you have kids and stuff? Yep. Do you have children? And
I have a 14-year-old daughter.
Okay, so then how do you got a 14-year-old daughter? That's 110 a day, 110% effort. Just watching them, worrying about them, and that's the age. Oh my God, 14, and they're fighting you, and they're wandering and floundering, and you worrying constantly. I had a 14-year-old daughter. Oh my God, 11-year-old daughter was fun. 20-year-old daughter's okay. 14-year-old daughter's a nightmare. And so
I've got a good one so far.
All right,
She's amazing right now.
good.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Keep that alive. They lose their mind. I don't know what Dr. Trin's daughters went through, but mine lost her mind for a couple of years, I swear. And I wasn't the only one saying that. Only other parent saying that. It's an intense period of time for all the reasons we know, hormones and peer pressure and growing up and all that kind of stuff. So how do you find the time to wander the world with a career, with a kid, with a family? Isn't that hard to do? Doesn't that call you home?
So I had some great, when my life freed back up. So I was going through, maybe just 10 years of grind, going from building, just to encourage anybody out there who decides to walk this path. Amazing things happen when you do. So just to fill in a couple more details, for instance, so I take that job, I leave college early and decide to make the sacrifice of what would certainly have been very fun for something that certainly was going to be really, really hard and stretch me and grow. Right. So I'm out there way over my head on this really complicated job. But guess what happens? Within a year, that highly competent project manager who won that project in the first place gets promoted to go open up a new division for the company. So now I'm a young person, in the flow of this job, and I'm really the only one that knows about it. He gets pulled off, right? So the responsibility just starts really, really quickly ratcheting up. So you go from running projects to figuring out how to bid projects, to running portfolios of projects. A few years later, I was able to help our company win a reservoir project, a dam project.
Sounds big.
And then ran that. By 25, I was the only person in the company other than the CEO and chief estimator who had dam experience. So then when we won a dam that was hundreds of millions of dollars with an international joint venture, they send me up to go represent the company on the joint venture.
It sounds like it paid off well. Your effort.
Yeah. You're like, so back to how you find the time, right? So it's continual sacrifice, so then I go and I start my own company. While I start my own company, I'm now doing my MBA on the nights and weekends, right? And so it's a full scale sprint, of a lot of, let's call it sacrifice, hard work, hard consuming work for 10 years.
And that ain't easy. That many of us quit along that journey. I desire to do the same thing you do, but am I willing to work that hard? Most of us aren't. Most of us at the end of the day.
So this is kind of where things started to break. So when I started to get back in touch with that vision, going back to showing up and trying to pray and write and rediscover what I was here for, by the time you get lost in that grind of 10 years of just larger and larger projects, and it's just like, blah, blah, blah. So finally it's like, okay, I got to the point where I had moved my family out of town when my daughter was 2 to take on a $500 million joint venture. My marriage is falling apart. Right. So it was like, all right, we need to recenter.
Which is what your father saw when he's building luxury homes and big homes for people with big pocketbooks. And on the outside, everything looks happy, and on the inside, the pressure, the grind, the everything of achieving that can be destructive.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to push against success. Success is great, but success has a price to it.
Exactly. So I got to the point on that big joint venture where it was another sacrifice, where then I chose to sacrifice my career potentially for my family. So we were 2 years in, and we had basically got to the point where we knew this was going to be one of the most profitable jobs in the company's history. We had it set, everything was going, the team of teams was running well. So I went to the CEO and I just said, hey, this may be expensive for me, but my marriage is falling apart. I need to get my wife home. We've got this job set up well. I'll transition it faithfully over the coming months. Yeah. We can do this slowly, but I need to get my wife back home near her family, and we need to regroup. So then it's like, just like you said, okay, I can see where this road of more and more work on larger and larger things while my family suffering leads. And I don't like that. And so I'm going to sacrifice, that potential for that in order to get back and recenter. But one thing that happened when I got back and recentered was I got back in touch with this idea from my youth of, okay, we're here on these work sites. And on a work site, there's this uniting idea of the designer's intent, the purpose that we're all here for.
Interesting.
And,
okay, right. We're building something. Yeah.
We're building, and we might be from 200 different companies, but we're all here to bring this intention into reality. Mm-hmm. And so where my life started opening up is I decided, okay, let's try to find some people who can think about planet Earth, not as a giant abstraction that is too big to do anything about, but as a small, finite place that if we wanted to, we could get in touch with an intention, a shared highest overarching and uniting intention. And within the course of a generation, we could marshal an unprecedented global joint venture to bring that intention into reality and to set our feet firmly on the path towards a better future. And so when I started saying
that's a mouthful. It's
a mouthful, right? So when you tried to start saying that, right, it repels a bunch of people, right? Somebody was like, what does that mean?
Has he lost his mind? Just get back to work. Yeah.
Get back to work. But what it did do was it found people, right? Because it found the few people who resonated with that and wanted to think at that level. So I ended up with other people in my CEO
Dr. TRINH
groups.
thinks at that level. He's going to blush, but he thinks at that level. He really does. He has a global, bigger picture vision of himself. He's not just a local country doctor, so to speak. I mean, he's been that and does that, but he still thinks on the metaverse of the universe, of the backwoods of the world, in a way that most of us never pay 2 seconds of thought to any of that effort.
So to finish answering your question and tie that in, that's why Dr. TRINH and I met, right? Because we were two people thinking big about other parts of the world. And that was where I was going with that, right? You ended up with people going, hey, you're talking like this. And I don't hear very many people talking like that. I know this one person who might want to talk with you. And so they connect, right? And then all of a sudden you find yourself, following those connections and coaching and mentoring and wisdom. And so I ended up being able to build a little portfolio of companies and put people in position to run those companies. That freed up my time to go be working to figure out how to survey and whether we could find good people around the world. And those kind of adventures led me to Dr. TRINH. So let's hear about some of your visions for the world, Dr. TRINH.
He doesn't pretend he has any of them. He jokes and says, I don't see any of this stuff. But the guy sits on, how many boards are you on now here? How many things you're always talking about, the metaverse and other futuristic things. Once in a while you drop out and you go to Vietnam or someplace like that. I mean, you have found a way to do what he's talking about, to balance a day-to-day existence, raise a family, run businesses, be successful, and still wander the world in your mind and in your body here. How do you do that, Dr. TRINH?
It's very simple. Just don't take your ADD medication.
Okay, is that it?
Works really well.
He makes a joke of everything. It's so simple.
No, I love Jordan. I love his vision. He started a nonprofit called LIONSBERG, and we've been chatting about it for a good number of years now on a regular basis.
And what is LIONSBERG, and what is it you want to? What do you want to do, Jordan? What is LIONSBERG?
When I started. Went through a few years of talking with those few people that wanted to talk about that level. And we challenged ourselves to see if it was possible to get our heads around a plan for the transformation of our lives and our world within a single generation. And that took years. It takes years of prayer and discernment and strategic thinking to even try to conceptualize something that might possibly work. It was like a consuming undertaking for years. And at the end of that, and a lot of travel around the world, as I said, to try to look at what was happening on the ground, what I realized was that, okay, we have all these different unfolding crises in the world.
Daily.
so many issues. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of people without adequate food, and there's
War,
billions
famine,
of people without
disease,
adequate education. And there's, I mean, being in these little clinics in Vietnam with Dr. TRINH, dressed in coveralls, doing surgery on people's eyes and watching the cataracts fall out onto the floor and people being able to see for the first time and going, we can give a blind person sight for $30. Yeah. Like, why are we not marshaling our collective resources so the blind can see? Like, you get in touch with it and so what I realized was there's people like Dr. TRINH already for decades who have been working tirelessly on the front lines of all these battles to make the world a better place, right. Sacrificing and marshaling their communities and marshaling resources. I mean, Dr. TRINH is one of the best people that I've seen at building community and networks around himself.
He really is. I'm amazed sometimes at this guy that I even get to talk to him, meet with him. He comes across, I just joke, no big deal. But it is a big deal. In quiet ways, he's making a big difference.
Yeah, that ease and sincerity. So when I discovered more and more people like Dr. TRINH around the world, I went, okay, the problem's not a lack of effort on the front lines of these battles. I mean, we as a human species, the force of goodwill around the world is alive and active, right. But every one of the organizations is struggling with things, under-resourced and lack of attention and trying to do what they can to organize their volunteers. And so what I ended up seeing was this massive dichotomy. It's like, okay, over here, I'm spending millions of dollars to build world-class systems and technologies to connect and empower a team of teams. And we have the best technology and the best software and we're meeting daily and we're focused and we're supporting each other and we're building back-end systems.
And we're building dams or other giant things out of nowhere, impossible tasks that we're just doing. I mean, you really are. You're used to making the impossible possible. You're used to taking these giant visions of a construction thing, a giant dam, and I'm going to bring that to fruition. And
bring it to fruition, yeah.
It's to fruition. It's going to suddenly appear. The seed is going to grow into a tree, and a fruit's going to start to fall from that tree here. That's an amazing experience.
So the vision of Lionsberg was basically, okay, well, what's needed? What is needed in service? If we are going to avoid failure and succeed at this moment in history, what's missing? What's the gap? And I was reminded of this prophetic vision from thousands of years ago where a prophet's standing and looking over a valley of dry bones. And as the valley of dry bones is spoken to, as the prophet starts to speak the truthful words that bring forth life and future, the dry bones start rising up and rattling and then coming into form and coalition, right? And so that was kind of the guiding vision. It's like, okay, these are all like amazing, valuable, unique parts of the body of goodwill strewn across the earth, but separated and divided, we're all struggling and we all lack the true transformational power to actually execute on the missions and the values that we share. And so that's the heart of Lionsberg, basically. So it's like, okay, what are we going to need? We're going to need to forge a backbone infrastructure to connect up these groups. We're going to need to figure out how we map and know what we know. We're going to need dynamic knowledge repositories. We're going to need shared templates and prototypes. We're going to need to figure out how
He's talking entrepreneur talk again here, Dr. TRINH. He's talking all this stuff that I hear all day long at UCI's Applied Innovation Center. Like this is just the normal way most of us talk. All right, we need data sets, we need templates, we need paradigms with shifts, we need organizational structure and everything. We do need all that because too often I listen to this show for a while. Dr. TRINH brings in people like himself who decided I can drive by and just ignore the problem, or maybe I can stop and pick this up. The famous story that somebody told me years ago, everybody's heard this story, but I'll say it one more time. The parable, the tale, whatever, however you want to describe. The little kid's at the beach in Mexico or someplace with his parents, and in wash all these starfish, and the starfish are going to die because they can't get back into the water, and it's just one of those occurrences. They all got washed up, and they're all going to die, and this kid starts picking them up one by one. There's millions of them, and he's picking up one by one and throwing them back in. One of the locals said, "What are you doing? You can't save them all." He said, maybe not, but I can save this one. And he throws it in. You know, we can do something one at a time. So the people Dr. TRINH brings, I'm thinking of two people in particular that struck me. One was in the midst of the beginning of the Ukraine crisis, the war, the invasion, whatever you want to call it, somebody goes back. She's a successful, I don't know, you can fill me in, Doctor, but she had some big job in like San Francisco, worked for some web company, and she had a call. I don't know if you remember if she had a connection there or not. I think she did.
Yes.
And she just said, I'm
a
quit.
live call from Ukraine.
Yeah. And she says, I'm going back.
Yep.
I don't know what I'm going to do, but we're going to get blankets. We're going to get food. People are displaced. And I'm going, she says to her boss, I guess I can quit, but maybe you can give me a sabbatical because I'd love to come back. I don't want to quit this career, but I got to go right now. I got to get on a plane and go there. And he says, go. His job says, go. And she ends up on the ground organizing, hustling, getting a little, as I recall, like a little storage unit, and send us some food and send us some rice and send us some blankets. Suddenly she's running this triage on the ground, sort of like what you're talking about, bringing this knowledge database, logistics feeling. And I don't know what she's doing, but she's making a difference in some way. Exactly. She's doing something. Yeah. She could have sat back in her chair, and comfy chair in San Francisco, and said, oh my, that's horrible, and then flick the channel to something else. Or she flicked the thing. And the other guy that struck me, there was one guy in your show, I forgot his name now, but he was driving along, I want to say Sand Canyon or someplace here in Orange County, some big street, and he sees a bunch of migrant workers over there, and like day laborers, migrant workers. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know these people, but somehow he gets this call, what if I went over and talked to them? I can easily drive. I've seen them, and I can just shake my head and forget what I've seen and keep driving to wherever he's going, or I can stop and go over and see if I can help these people. Why? What? That road not taken, that turn when we all have a chance to do something and we just keep walking. We just change the channel. Dr. TRINH brings on people who don't change the channel, who suddenly change their life. And that's mind-boggling to me. That's what you're talking about here. Now you're talking about organizing all these little individual people that suddenly responding to some call and putting them into a team, into an action group, into a giant network that can build dams against bad things. That's
dams against injustice.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's like the way that my being works is when I see that infinite beach of starfish, it's like, okay, yes, and hooray to every child who's out there one at a time.
Right.
And it's like, for the love of God, could we please get a little organized and we can do 10x, right? It's like, and so it's totally noble to do it one at a time. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's also an opportunity cost, but because by keeping our heads down, struggling in isolation one at a time, we're foregoing the opportunity to arise and unite as a truly capable, competent body that could actually execute and move towards the future we want. And so it's like, what's the cost of doing nothing?
Right.
Is one. And that cost is maybe more expensive than we possibly know.
Right.
So let's do something. But then what's the cost of struggling in isolation and failing to live up to the potential we could have together, right? And it's
because the kid really only did save a handful. Obviously, we know the end of the story. Millions of them did still die. But the child made an effort, took a stand to save a few. And that's the point. Do we even bother to save a few when it's so overwhelming? I'll give you a different example. I see this all the time. I've had this discussion with people, big charities that have come in here. And I say, you give us such a big, overwhelming problem that you lose me right at the beginning. It's so overwhelming what you're trying to do. Stop cancer, stop poverty, stop. And I was related to, this is a horrible example. Don't beat me up for doing it, but it's a real example. I grew up watching starving babies from Africa. That was the charity that kept popping up. Save the children, feed the children. And they'd show you these horrendous images of these children. And your heart was tugged to reach in and pull $10 a month, $20 a month. But at some point, you quit because it seems so overwhelming. It isn't that I don't want to give. I can't affect this. I can't stop this. There's nothing I can do to change this. Next week, the children are still starving, and next month they're still starving. And you get burned out of this whole thing. I give and I give and I give, and nothing happens. And so I quit. Take that analogy and apply it to anything. And I think that so often we get good people give up because it just seems so hopeless.
Yeah. 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 I think that goes back to struggling in isolation. It's like,
I think that's part of it. I don't feel like I'm making any difference, so I quit.
So, I mean, just two quick threads to pull. One is that the problem with treating, there's a difference between charity and true transformational justice that addresses and transforms the root causes of suffering. And so often we will get overwhelmed and we will fail if we're looking at all the symptoms and chaos of all the people starving, all the people struggling to pay their bills, all the people imprisoned in debt, all the people who have lost a loved one to some form of premature death or suicide or substance abuse, all of the people who are split from their families over some religious or political issue, all the people who are like, so when you're looking at all of those issues, and then you have, like you're saying, you have profoundly emotional pitches from charities who make their existence addressing them. God bless all of us who are doing that work, by the way.
Right.
But it's overwhelming. So what we've tried to do the last years in construction, we have something called a root cause analysis, and it's kind of a simple thing, but one of the most famous tools is like the 5 whys. So somebody gets hurt on a job site. Why did that happen? And there's a proximal explanation. And then if you ask why again, you get a little deeper. And if you keep asking why, you get closer to the root cause.
Interesting.
So there was a famous.
You got to ask why 5 times. You're saying you got to ask why 5 times. You can't say why did he get hurt? Well, because we didn't have safety helmets. Okay, then why didn't we have safety helmets?
Why didn't we have safety helmets?
Yeah, and then you got to ask why 5 times to get to the real core of, well, we don't have safety helmets because, I don't know, we don't have enough money or something here or whatever it is.
Yeah. And so you end up, and what you end up finding is when you have 10 different accidents, and you might get 10 different answers on the first why, but by the time you ask why 5 times, you start getting to the true root causes of the way you're operating.
Interesting.
And when you transform those deep root causes, then all of a sudden all the symptoms go away, right? And so you have to get to the root cause. So that's where we're at as a human species. There is absolutely no way that through charity, treating and subsidizing the tremendous suffering of billions of people flowing from the deeper root causes, there is no way that we can use 1% or 10% of our time and energy to fix the problems that we're causing with the other 90%. Right. The only possible way is to get to the root causes of how we're being and cooperating and competing and destroying each other in the earth as a human species that's causing all of that.
Right.
And then you start to get there. So there was this priest in South America who said, when I ask why, when I feed the poor, people call me a saint. When I ask why they're poor, they call me a communist.
A radical.
The radical. Yeah, you go do charity. It's like you treat and subsidize the causes of dysfunction, cover them up, make them go away. Why are all these people starving? It's like, you radical communists, like support the program, right?
I'll switch this to another gear, and maybe we'll bring Dr. TRINH back in again. So he always talks about the dysfunction in the current medical system. On the one hand, we live longer and have healthier lives than we ever have. We live into our 90s, many of us now, and everything. So you could argue health's a wonderful thing, and we figured it all out. But there isn't anybody that feels that our health system couldn't be better. It's a machinery. You get 2 minutes in front of the doctor. They're really only there to analyze the immediate problem and not look at the holistic solution. What's causing your pain or suffering or back problem or something here? I'm going to treat that immediate symptom, and I basically only have 2 tools in my kit, a pill or a procedure. I can't look at a lifestyle change. I can't look at nutrition. I can't look at alternatives of any sort. I got 5 minutes to fix this problem. I got a pain. I got a procedure. Which do you want? Move on. And then they come back and stay in the system over and over and over again. And the system rewards everybody for that process of pushing them through. and it doesn't really solve a lot of the chronic conditions that take more thought or effort or life changes or holistic approach. We've all got, it's modern world. We all have depression, anxiety, diabetes, overweight, high cholesterol. These are just chronic conditions we've just accepted as part of modern living here. And could we change this? Could we fix any of this? First, you got to ask why, and then you got to be a radical and want to change the whole system and uproot the whole system here. So it's easier just to put a Band-Aid on it and keep it moving. Isn't that what we do about all these problems, Dr. TRINH? Are we just putting a Band-Aid on it? When I give $10 to feed the children in Africa, I've put a Band-Aid on it. I don't know that I've helped stop the bleeding for that minute. And yes, that's some value. But after time, I get tired of putting Band-Aids on it. And then we go to the bigger issue, why doctors and nurses quit and burn out and kill themselves and everything here. Because they just feel hopeless. I'm just endlessly putting Band-Aids on things here.
There's a large group of Kaiser medical professionals on strike right now.
Yeah, largest ever.
Is that 85,000 professionals or something?
I think it's the largest ever.
Technicians, radiology tech. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And they can't recruit people into this field. All the money that you can make, all the need for this thing, and they're just having struggle to do it because it's burnout. And it's burnout because all I'm doing is treating, it's triage. I'm treating the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I'm never stopping the problem. I'm just stopping the bleeding for the moment. Isn't that the way we approach so many problems? Health problems.
You nail in the head. And we've had lots of discussions, Jordan and I, about how the current health system operates, and it's a system that is built upon sickness, not upon wellness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're rewarded. Sickness is a good thing. If I made everybody well, we'd all go out of business. I mean, the business is about treating, and we need a business. We need charities to stop the bleeding, to get the food out to people immediately. That wonderful woman goes to Ukraine. I'm going to go on the ground. I'm going to disseminate food, but she's not stopping the problem. The problem is there's a conflict going on there, and as long as there's conflict, you're going to disrupt people. People are going to die. People are going to get disrupted. Bad things are going to happen. But until that happens, somebody steps in and puts bandages everywhere. The triage approach. So you do need triage on the battlefield, but at some point you got to step back and say, how do we stop the battle?
Dr. TRINH, what are some of the high points of a, we've been talking for years about what it would look like if we, the people, were to launch
That's a radical. Right away, you're a radical. When you say we, the people, now you're a hippie, you're a communist, you're something.
If we, the people, were to, set up a citizen-led joint venture to help liberate ourselves from the medical industrial complex and start really moving towards total integrated well-being and development of body, mind, and spirit and community harmonized with the ecology, what are some of the high points of that vision?
What's the radical communist disruptive response to that? We the people. That just rattles me. When I think there were a group of men that stood in a room in Philadelphia and put those words on a piece of paper, and they started with "We the people."
Jordan was a presidential candidate.
You were? Did you run for president?
I'm voting.
Oh, no, he didn't. Well, okay, so he asked you a serious question.
Let's talk about our vision for. Let's talk about a positive vision for the future of citizen-led healthcare that liberates humanity from the destruction of the current system.
Education, which is lacking in the healthcare system, right? With a 10 to 15 minute visit with your doctor, there's no time for education on prevention. What can I do to prevent why I'm here in the medical office?
And right? I'll say that's on both sides. The doctor doesn't have much time to get educated about who you are and what the problem is. I only got 10 minutes. How much can I learn in 10 minutes?
Absolutely. So we, the people, need to be educated. It all starts with education. And education doesn't really truly exist today on the issue of healthcare, wellness, and prevention. Our system, again, is designed where you only see the doctor when you're sick. You don't see him when you're well. But the doctor doesn't have time to tell you what you need to do to stay well, whether it's metabolic syndrome, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. And so the problem is compounded by the fact that we have large organizations and corporations that push for profit over wellness, right? Think of the food industry. The word sugar is hidden in the label, right? We don't use sugar. We use different words.
Fructose or
corn,
corn syrup.
Right? Corn syrup, fructose, sucrose, sucralose, and so we have an industry,
and not to sound conspiratorial,
not toward health but toward profits.
Not to sound conspiratorial, but they hide the word sugar because sugar's the addictive quality. Sugar's what makes it. Sugar's what makes it go down so well.
It's so fascinating that usually when we talk about healthcare and what the solutions are to let's say 70+% of the U.S. population that's suffering with some largely unnecessary disease. Usually we talk about healthcare solutions. I asked you what a positive vision for the future of healthcare is, and you said education, 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 and you didn't even mention healthcare as a doctor. So like double tap on that. What percentage of the suffering that you're seeing in emergency rooms and in your practices, I mean, what percentage of that suffering is self-inflicted, that if people only knew that we were destroying our bodies and our earth through the way that we're producing and consuming food and all that, I mean, what percentage of that would fade away if we had full knowledge?
A vast majority of it will fade away. The fact that 2 out of 3 Americans are overweight, the fact that there are 13 cancers that are linked to being overweight, the fact that 2 out of 3 Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the number of diseases that stems out of diabetes, including heart disease, Alzheimer's and things of that sort. Most of it is lifestyle choices. Nutrition, what we decide to eat or not eat, what's in our refrigerator, how much exercise we want to do, how much sleep we want to get.
Anxieties, depressions, other things. I'm not all saying, but a lot of that is environmentally. It's a lifestyle-driven disease. I think it's the great American disease.
But I can't really put it on just lifestyle choices, because we have. I mean, when there's McDonald's, at close to the elementary schools, right, and fast foods and all that, a lot of it is industry that has driven this. When the soil that we have under our ground is tainted with, pesticides, herbicides, and whatever else is there, and the nutrients have been sucked out, oftentimes it's not really just a lifestyle choice, because oftentimes there's no choice.
Yeah.
It's what you have.
Yeah, there's no choice.
Right. That's what they say.
Yeah, I mean, you decide to eat healthier and you go into the store and you pick up a beautiful, healthy vegetable, not understanding that there's very little nutrient value and that it's full of chemicals that actually inhibit the process of building up life and destroy your microbiome. And so it's like, that's so.
It's modified.
It's
it's genetically modified. It's designed to grow disease-free and to be a certain size and to have certain desirable characteristics to it as a commodity, which may inhibit some of its original value as a produce.
And back to this, we're kind of doing this root cause analysis a little bit right now, right? Because we could have had a conversation on how we're going to fix the healthcare system, but Dr. TRINH, who's one of the best and most widely networked doctors I know,
me too,
says the way to fix it is through education, by we the people together outside of the structures that are causing this.
Can I put a pin in this and see if we could do a part 2 someday, because we have run out. I spent the whole time talking about your personal journey and trying to get you to open up, tell us about the struggle of getting to where you're at, because that's, to me, the most interesting part of it. We all want to do good. Why don't we?
Yeah.
You want to ask the why? then start with that. Why don't we? And what is it that keeps us from doing good? And that's why I was trying to understand why you, how you, when you, why you, all that stuff. I got some sense of that. And now we're getting into the bigger question of how we can band together as we the people. I'm going to suggest that you rebrand your whole company and call it We the People. The three most powerful words that you can say, the three most radical words. When you say We the People, you immediately sound like a revolutionary. And that's exactly what this country was founded on, with those three words in the Declaration of Independence, We the People, in order to form a more perfect union. Do hereby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The whole preamble.
Exactly.
Whether that's the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, I always forget. But We the People is where it all started. When you make those things, and when you stand up and say that, you do sound like a radical.
Well, we know that a house divided against itself can't stand, and so we the people have a decision to make. We can either get back to that, or we can watch the last couple elections at the tail end of a failing experiment. And so, there could not be a more critical moment in human history where the greatest experiment in democracy ever hangs on the line, and it hinges whether we, the people, the 80 or 90% of us who are sane, wise, good, loving, just people can figure out how to find each other outside of the corrupt systems and structures that are separating and dividing and deceiving us, to forge a more perfect union among ourselves, capable of leading into the future with wisdom and
I'll go even one step deeper. Do we, the people, still see ourselves as one people? Or do we want to burge into different communities? Should we really separate? Will we lead to civil war? Will we lead to disruption? We already are so far apart, red states and blue states, rural and urban, black and white. We've already dividing ourselves to be a house divided against itself. Do we want to come together as one is there a uniting principle behind all this? We once thought there was, that overlooked, you're from here and you're that color and you're this, but there was something that bound us together. I think those bounds are coming undone. And I'm not sure that
what's the one thing that unites the many? What is the unity amidst the diversity? What is the fundamental tone that causes the divine symphony to sound, right? That's the whole thing. That's the whole moment of history. And so we, the people, have to decide if we're one
a group of individuals
under God,
right,
under the highest overarching uniting principle, and the truth and love and justice and goodness and beauty that flow from that are shared goals and aspirations and visions for the future, or whether we're going to watch our children and grandchildren suffer in the disintegrating ruins of our failure to come together across the lines that divide us.
Those are the stakes, folks. Is there a we, or is there just a me? We live in a world of me.
Can we make that we big enough? Yeah. Like we maybe became three on this podcast today,
right?
And that's a small army capable of changing the world. Right. And so can we make that we big enough to actually develop the transformation that's needed?
That's your goal, because we're always me. I'm just finding a way to make it. I can't change the world, but I can save this one starfish. I'm just talking about individual actions I can do to make me feel better and make me feel like I'm doing something. But the fear is, what I said earlier, is you get frustrated, you fail, you think it's hopeless, and you give up without united action. I don't know what unites us anymore. I sure know what divides us, but I'm not sure.
Did this conversation help unite us?
I think Dr. Trin's right. Conversation of any kind. He'd say, Dr. Trin would say education. I'd reframe it and say conversation. If I only talk to my doctor, instead of, I'll give you a perfect, I know we're going a minute over, but we had somebody on the show the other day, and she was an independent pharmacist, and she was a fascinating woman. She talked about integrative medicine and how you got to integrate other traditions other than Western traditions, and she's Indian, so it's Ayurvedic for her, and some other things, and on and on and on, these big picture things. And I said, when do I ever? And she said, it starts with your pharmacist. Your pharmacist has lots of data, but the pharmacist needs to get educated, like Dr. Trin, about other things and cannabis and other things. And I said, whoa, step back. Even if that person had all this knowledge, when do I talk to my pharmacist? I went in there the other day, and it's a pill pusher. I'm sorry, I don't want to be too harsh, but it's an assembly line. Next. And there is a line over there you can stand, and they'll groan and roll their eyes. Okay, you want to stop the machine and go over and ask questions. There is a format to do that, and they're happy to do that, I suppose. but not too happy because they got 20 other people behind you at CVS trying to get their prescription. And so I tend to view them just as a transactional, as a clerk at the counter. I don't view them as a consultant in my health process. We don't talk. We don't talk to each other. We don't talk to anybody. So even if there are knowledge sources out there, even if we were all educated on what to do, my argument is it starts with what we're doing. We got to talk to one another. Then we can learn from one another, and then we can learn about what's happening. But no conversation.
We definitely need a part 2.
Yeah. Let's put a pin on this.
It would be a deep pleasure, gentlemen. Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation. And Paul, great to be with you today. Dr. TRINH, thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in the world. And thanks for having me on today.
I welcome meeting people like you guys because I'm one of the good. I'd like to do good, but I probably don't do much good in the world other than wring my hands and try and get people to talk. That's my only superpower.
Well, that's the amazing thing, I guess, just to, Paul, this is encouraging for someone, but you have an incredible platform here with OC Talk Radio, and every day you're doing this dialogue, and so everybody that thinks that there's not a profound way that they can arise and unite as part of that force for good and move these needles. I mean, Paul, there is, we can develop a quarterly plan, and with your superpowers, you can move the needle because it starts with a shift of consciousness. It starts with education and enlightenment, and then coalescing the enlightening people who are helping one another, shed our ignorance and see the light of the future.
Well, there's the
come together outside
the three
of the
components.
places.
Dr. TRINH says education. I believe in that. I'm not disputing that. We got to know, we got to understand. And what we can do and talk to each other, and both sides. The doctor has to talk to the patient has to talk to the doctor. We all have to understand how the process works. I get that. I say, though, but it starts with you got to talk to each other and have a conversation, and then how we keep the conversation going. It wasn't so, gee, that was horrible, and then I forget about it. An ongoing conversation.
We keep it going.
And then you're talking about, okay, so how do you take that energy, that new enthusiasm, that conversation and that education, and turn it into action and success? Otherwise, we're all just bumping into each other and running out of hope.
Exactly. So yeah, if anybody feels inspired by this conversation, find me, find Dr. TRINH.
How do they find you?
Find Paul.
How do they find you?
You can find me at jordannicholas.org. If you want to structurally connect, click join the movement, and that'll connect you to our frequent things. I'm at jnicholas1 on most social media, and find Dr. TRINH as well. Let either of us know you heard the conversation, you're interested in our work as we the people, moving out into seeing how we can help connect and enlighten people around the world.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Let's come back and do this again. Let's not let the conversation stop here.
All right. Name the date and I will be there. Nice to be with you guys.
Hang
today.
on for a second and we'll talk about that offline here. So hang on. Thanks for joining us. Well, there you have it. Is that the beginning or the end? You tell me. It's all about we the people and coming together, talking through health talks like this right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studios right here at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.